You talk about the small things that the EU does that annoy me, and they annoy me too as well. But I think the things that annoy me most about the EU are the big things. You know, the European Court of Human Rights overruling our courts, or us not being able to set up an immigration policy, or us having to spend lots of money on EU membership. It's the big things that bother me rather than the little things. The little things are an irritant that amuse the tabloid press, but the real issue here is the big issues.
I'm quite shocked with I think Human Rights Act is a pretty good thing. I think if anyone ever thinks this country beyond the centre of our liberty. Absolutely. I mean, health and safety. We can all joke about you must read this before you can step on a ladder. It goes much beyond that. That's the thin end. It's about making sure that people have equal access to things, that people understand it. And it means that, for example, a disabled person in the UK who has disabled rights, disabled access here, can get exactly the same rights when they go abroad. So that's exactly what that does.
First of all, I thank you for actually giving a specific example, because we talk about the generalities of the EU rather than actually giving some examples, which allow us to say, do we like that or not? Having said that, the example you give of step ladders, nothing to do with the EU. Those labels are not EU labels. They come from British Standards Institute and its family, its European family of standard setters. And similarly, European Court of Human Rights, nothing to do with the EU. The European Court of Justice enforces European law. The European Court of Human Rights was set up by British lawyers in the 1940s after the Second World War, and it does human rights, but it's not an EU body. Difficult though, isn't it? I mean, how many people do you think in the British population could not tell the difference between the European Court of Justice and the European Court of Human Rights? I would say a huge majority. So that works to our detriment. One example, though, to finish off with, we have chemicals legislation. European chemicals legislation is the biggest single piece of legislation in terms of sheer word length that there is. And the reason for this is we use 30,000 chemicals in our daily life. Most of them have never been tested properly to establish whether they cause long-term problems for human health or the environment. So we've got this huge piece of legislation called REACH, Registration, Evaluation, Authorization of Chemicals, and a chemicals agency in Helsinki, which is now working through the whole lot, and companies have to prove that their products are safe. You know, the object of that is ultimately to protect our planet and to protect ourselves. And when you talk to industry about it, many of whom quibbled about all sorts of details, the one thing they were all united about was that however this legislation works out, it is better to have one piece of legislation governing the chemicals industry, which is multinational, than 27 different pieces of legislation and 27 different standards.
Whether we like it or not, whether you like it or not, 75 to 80% of our laws are now made through the European institutions. We in the Conservative Party think that that's too much. We think that we've handed over too many competencies over to the European Union, and we want to see competencies or powers in two specific areas actually brought back to the Westminster Parliament in social and employment law. And just touch on one of those areas, which I think is a real issue for us as a nation, and that's the UK's opt-out from the Working Time Directive. Working Time Directive seeks to implement restrictions on how long we can work, and would have a devastating effect, not just on British business and our ability to compete in the global economy, but it unfortunately would have a devastating effect on public services here in the UK, particularly the health service, if we had to implement this. Labour's MEPs, against the advice of their party nationally, who want to keep the opt-out, Labour MEPs in the European Parliament voted to abolish the opt-out and put additional burdens on British business. And I think in a time of economic downturn, the worst recession we've had in a generation, to put that additional regulation and burden on British business, I think is unforgivable.
Okay, well that's all we've got time for tonight. It's 6:30 now, we just got it back, so we've been out for an hour and a half. If you are going to vote, the election is on June the 4th, and as I said, there's registration forms at the site, and you can also go to either aboutmyvote.co.uk or the oni.org.uk. Thanks for coming, and hopefully we'll have another one of these events soon. Thanks very much.